Okay, thank you very much, Dympna. Sorry, Arthur's on the phone again. Can I just set the score?
Yeah, of course.
Sorry. I have been designing costume for, next year is going to be 50 years since I've been designing costumes. And so I just want to tell you a little bit more about my story and also about some of the things that has inspired me over the years in terms of the designs that I've done. And then ultimately a bit more about my legacy, because that's where the real benefit comes in. How we're going to continue. That obviously it is important that Arthur does come on, because obviously he is doing half of the presentation. Okay, so as I was saying, you know, I've been designing costume for the past 49, going on 50 years next year. I originally came from the Federation of St. Kitts Nevis back in 1976, the same year that Leeds Carnival started. But during that time, my focus was about catching up on my education, because when I came to this country, I was put into the bottom class by some miraculous assessment, where I was asked to read a book in front of a class of white children, obviously being in awe of everything around me, up in a multi-story building, which I've never been into before. The teacher then decided I should be put in the bottom class. So there I was. So I realized that that was not the case for me. And I knew from my education in the Caribbean that I was much better than that. So I then spent most of the summers from 67 right up to 2000 and up to 1971, catching up with my education. By that time, I actually got a job as an apprentice engineer. And one day, by chance meeting, I met Arthur France, who was the chair of the Leeds Carnival then, and still is, by the way. And he said to me, what the Carnival needs is young people like you to be part of it, and good designers like you. Now, at the time, I'd never actually designed any costumes, but certainly not here in England that he knew of. I mean, in the Caribbean, I did dabble a little bit. I made some stilts when I was about 12 years old and almost broke my legs. And my grandmother taught me that you shouldn't do things like that. So I got a good hiding as part of the process. But so Arthur encouraged me to join the Carnival Committee, which I did. And can I just say that for me, that was a real big turning point in my life. I've got a slide number 1. I don't know if you're able to show those. Are you able to show slide number 1 or picture number 1? Is that possible? Yep. No, those are Arthur's pictures. So 1, 2, 8 or whatever is Arthur's. Mine says HC1. That's back of it. That's it. That's it. Good. Right. This picture was taken in 1974. And here you have Arthur, myself, a couple more young guys, Vince, Hebrew.
Oh, Hebrew.
And the guy on the right-hand side, he inspired me somewhat, because I was working at a company in Cleckheaton at the time called Mintex. And I worked in the factory, and there were 800 people there. And I was one of 2 black person in that organization. And so I came across a lot of, overt racism. And I asked him, well, tell me, how do you cope, in terms of, when you're in your job and people make, sort of weird comments about you and you feel like fighting in some instances. He said, Hughbon, remember this, you're there to learn a trade. So what you need to do is focus on your trade. He said, if the schools and the colleges and the university cannot educate the people in this country about who we are, what chances have you singly to be able to do that. And I thought, yeah, that's really good advice. So I began to sort of basically ignore what people were saying about me and just focus on becoming an engineer. And I'll tell you a little bit more story about that, because what happened was that I originally started as a craft apprentice, and I then went on to be a technical apprentice. So a craft apprentice actually works on the shop floor, and a technical apprentice works in the offices. So when I got promoted to a technical apprentice, one of the engineers, who made it very clear he didn't want to speak to me as a black person, he said to me, "Come here, I want a word with you." So I walked over to him, a bit more proud of myself now, because I knew I was no longer at his level. And he said to me, "What this country needs is good engineers like you on the shop floor." I said, "You're right. And what this country needs even more of is good engineers like me in the offices." So that was the beginning of my understanding of identity as a person. Also, what was really, really good about this point was that until I actually joined the organization, it was the first time I actually came across a situation where there wasn't a white person at the top of the organization running it. Because in the Caribbean, clearly, most of the organization and activities are run by Black people. But in this country, at that point, we had very little, but I said had no evidence of any Black person being in a senior position. But I knew in Carnival, we had a group of people who were responsible for that one particular day. We ran the streets, and I was part of that. And there wasn't another white person above me. So I felt really good and proud of myself, as an individual, and enjoyed being in that situation. Okay, if I can move on to slide number 2. Right, this is my first winning costume in 1979. Now, bearing in mind, I started making costumes in 1971. So I had like an 8-year apprenticeship before I actually made my first winning costume. And, quite often I would hear people say, well, you're always winning. But clearly that's far from the truth, because, I've had an 8-year apprenticeship. And quite often people who've never actually been to a carnival workshop would just decide, oh, they can make a carnival costume and then expect to win. And the truth is sometimes they do win. But, I always equate that to like being a good cook. You can go to the market and buy lots of ingredients and come home and put it all in a pot and cook something. And it can taste really good. But that does not make you a top chef. And I think people need to recognize that subtle difference. So that was my first winning Carnival Queen, and I quite enjoy the idea of being the winner. Okay, slide number 3.
Oh, wow.
I'm quite often asked, about where I get my inspiration from. And so I just want to talk about several costumes and where I got my inspiration from. This one was a fantasy costume. The young lady who was wearing it, I was at a meeting with a group I was designing for. And that particular year, they were short of funding. And the decision was, do I make just a troop costume, or do I try and make a troop and a queen costume? And they said, well, they said, we'll not do a queen costume because we wouldn't want Hughbon to make a rubbish queen costume. And she said, Hughbon would never make a rubbish costume. And I thought, wow, with that kind of reputation, I have to respond. So I made this costume called the Bush Warrior. And if you look at it in terms of its design, it's very, very simple. It's basically some fabric that's molded around some fiberglass. And the trick is really having that hinge mechanism in the middle that allows the leaves to behave like real leaves. So when they blow in the wind, they simply flop around. But without the engineering understanding to enable such a big leaf to be hinged in that particular position, then you'll never do it. So it was good that I was able to design a costume very much around fantasy. Okay, slide number 4 is Tropical Delight. Again, this particular design was just one where I've looked at what I've learned about, making flowers and leaves. I've used a similar technique in terms of making the flowers. But in this particular case, what I did was I actually blended that with a butterfly. So the butterfly became part of this Tropical Delight in terms of design. And again, this costume was a winning costume in Leeds as well as Preston. Costume number 5.
Oh, wow.
Okay, this one was influenced by nature. This was made back in 1986, and that's my sister wearing it. And I'll tell you the story behind this. I was visiting the tropical garden at Roundhay Road, at Roundhay Park. And my wife and I was coming out of the garden, having been around, seeing the plants and the animals and the insects and so on. And I noticed in this particular glass case was this anemone, with wonderful tentacles swaying in the water. So I said to my wife, well, that wasn't there when I came in. She said, yes, it was, just that it was closed. And I thought, wow, that's an idea for a costume. How about if all you saw at the beginning was something that was closed and black, then open up, that would be excellent. So I went home and I designed this costume. But here's the story behind it. Now, I was designing costume for quite a few years by that point. And my dad said to me, he was at the Queen show, and when my sister first came out, and all you could see was this black outer casing, he said, oh, I'm really disappointed that, you would design a costume like this for your sister. But when she stood up and revealed all the tentacles, she said, wow, that was a really wonderful costume. And of course, the judges also agreed because they made it as a winning costume that particular year. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. This is the peacock. This was made last year. Again, it's a winning costume. And bearing in mind, my first winning costume was 40 years ago, back in 1979. To have that consistency, so 40 years later does show my consistency in terms of making costumes. But this costume of a peacock was one that I made. I've made several peacocks before, and most people have made many peacocks because they are beautiful creatures. The feathers are absolutely wonderful. So why would one not want to be a peacock? But this particular peacock, when she came on stage, the plumes that you can see in an upright position, they were dragging on the floor like a proper peacock would. And then she operated the mechanism that allowed the feathers to rise up into the vertical position. And when the crowd saw that, they just love it to bits. Okay, the next slide. Wow. This was taken at Leeds train station. It was just a butterfly. Again, I think I made that back in 2001. And the reason why I made this butterfly was that I wanted to replicate the movement of the butterfly wings, but it was difficult to make a really big movement with such wings. So what I did was made multiple wings and allow them to move gently to create a much bigger effect of wings movements. And again, that was not a winning costume. Okay, move on to this next slide. All right, this is a lionfish. The lionfish is one of those fish that came from the Indo-Pacific Ocean, but it is now in the Caribbean Sea, and because it has no natural predator, it is eating a lot of the indigenous fish there, and that is a real problem. And so I wanted to design something that highlight the fact that this particular fish, is now becoming a problem in the Caribbean. And as you can see from this particular design, I try to replicate the size of it and its beauty and its innocence in a sense, but also the fact that it is so deadly, because the fins are deadly in terms of it's poisonous, it being poisonous. But it's also beautiful in terms of the way it moves in the water. And this costume was carried on the young lady's shoulder. It wasn't on wheels, and she just danced with it gracefully in the show. Unfortunately, it was not a winning costume in Leeds, but you can't win everything.
It's beautiful.
Okay, the next slide. Okay, this one was very much around storytelling, because I'm always amazed, that you hear these stories about during this transatlantic slavery, how so many millions of slaves being transferred from Africa down to Caribbean and to the Americas. And I'm thinking, well, there must be a time when the slaves actually managed to get free. And sorry, it's Arthur again. Can I just answer it? Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. It looks as though Arthur cannot get through, which is a bit of a shame, really. But I wasn't even able to talk to him just now. Anyway, back to the slides. So I was saying, that I was absolutely amazed. You never hear any stories about the slaves getting freed and actually taking over the boats. So I've designed this particular costume with that in mind, where I want to tell the story that the slaves became free and they became admirals and actually roamed the sea and sailed around the sea and sailed back to Africa and became free all over again. So this is one of those designs I wanted to tell that story. Next slide, please. This costume is influenced by current affairs. And as you know, COVID is very much at the forefront of all of our minds. And in the early days, when there was a shutdown and everyone had to stay at home, I was working in collaboration with a school in London called James Dixon School. And the children there, I think it was about 42 of them, actually designed costumes based on their understanding about the way they saw the situation. So a lot of the costume was designed around being in lockdown, the NHS heroes, working from home, home working, and so on. And what happened was they sent me all these various designs. And I in turn then put them in various categories and came up with one single design, which is that particular design showing hope and kindness, and the angel being quite central to that particular portrayal. That costume, as it stands there, is now on display in the school as part of the memory of that particular period in time in terms of the lockdown. Also, what you can't see very clearly is that I managed to put a picture, a copy of the picture on the bottom of the costume of all the kids who took part. So the pictures are in. I had to delete the faces, unfortunately, but they can look at that and say, well, yes, we were involved in designing that particular costume.
Beautiful.
Okay, the next slide. This one is about anniversary. As we know, back in 2012, it was the Queen Jubilee, Diamond Jubilee. And so this costume was designed as part of that celebration. And we try to incorporate, I try to incorporate, as many of the features that would reflect very much what it was like in terms of the Queen and her pageantry. This was called the Queen of the Redcoats because the troop that went with it were in red coats. Next slide, please. Okay, now here's another one that talks about anniversary. This is the one that's called Man on Horseback. And it goes like this, that back in 2007, I was challenged with designing a costume that can be seen as part of the celebration of the bicentenary of the abolition of slavery. And having done warriors before and the ship in terms of the slaves being overthrowing the slave owners and sailing the seas, I thought very, very long and hard as to how I can design something that would capture what it was all about in terms of the celebration of 200 years of slavery. Now, one of the things that came to me was this, a saying that my grandmother, Henrietta Walters, she was from St. Kitts, she lived in St. Kitts, and she would often say, "Man on horseback, nah, see that," meaning man on horseback is not going to see that. And she would use that saying when one is seen fussing over fine details. And so I asked, where did this saying come from? And it transpired that this saying came from a period when the slaves were working in the fields, the man on the horse was the overseer, and the slaves can get away with certain misdemeanor, providing the man on the horse didn't see them. Hence the saying, "Man on horseback, now I see that." So I went about designing a full-size horse, as you can see in that particular picture, and one side of it was the sugarcane plantation, and on the other side and the back of it was plants and flowers you would see in the Caribbean. Go to the next slide, please. And here's what the sort of finished item looks like. So you have the man on the horse, and that man represents not just the overseer in the field, but certainly all of the people who are responsible for that transatlantic slavery. Now, that particular portrayal of that particular story goes like this. There was the slave girl being attached at the back of the horse, and she was being dragged along the sugarcane field by the man on the horse. And when she got into the middle of the stage, which in effect was where the performance takes place, she managed to get her hands free and pretended then to be a sugarcane worker. So she got a cutlass and chopped down the whole of the sugarcane plant, as you can see, on one side of the scenery. So she cut the top and the bottom off. She then felt somewhat empowered, and she then decided to rip her slave clothes off to reveal her true identity. She then challenged the man on the horse by operating a trip mechanism that was keeping the horse in the walking position. And when she operated the trip mechanism, the horse then reared up into a vertical position, and the man kind of like half fell off the horse. She then proceeded to pull the man off the horse, took the whip from him, whipped him a few times, dashed him to the side, and then climbed onto the horse and ride the horse backwards and forwards for a little while, and then brought it back down into a tame position. She then dismounted the horse and took the horse off to a new destination. So that was the story about that particular design.
Wonderful.
Okay, the next slide, please. So there's a picture of the horse in the parade and the Queen riding majestically on it. A little story about that as well. because the horse looked so real from afar. I remember one of the queens telling me that one of her friends said to her, "I didn't know you can ride a horse." So there you go. It was quite a good portrayal. Okay, the next slide, please. I wanted to talk about my legacy. You know, as a designer, I feel that I excel in terms of my mechanics as a designer. And, you know, many people, other designers come from different backgrounds. Some are good painters, some are fine artists, you know, and so on. So for me, my strength was mechanical engineering. And so I was somewhat impressed back in 2011 when my son decided that he's going to design a costume for me. Now that's quite a turnaround because when he was younger, I would leave little jobs for them to do at home whilst I go to work. And, you know, him and his sister would do these little jobs on the costumes. But his sister would always do the task I asked her to do. But whenever I returned back home, my son would say, "Oh, well, I was thinking about it, and I think we should do it this way and that way." And he doesn't actually do what I ask him to do, which is most annoying. But one day we were being interviewed by the BBC and about, you know, our relationship. And it transpired that he said that my attitude towards designing was, I was the designer, it was always my way or no way. And so he didn't have the opportunity to express his flair as a designer. So that particular year, he decided to make me a costume, which was really, really good. Sorry, my phone is playing, I'm sorry. Sorry, technology for you. Okay, I just switched it off. Sorry about that. So yeah, he decided to make me a costume, and it was really nice to be able to wear a costume that my son has actually designed, and that's my son in the middle there, and one of my nephews, one of his best mates as well, on the right hand side. So that was quite a big turning moment in my life in terms of my carnival journey. So I see this very much as my legacy. Next slide, please. And here's a costume that my son designed entirely on his own. Again, that was designed last year, called the Peacock. It was called Too Cocky. In fact, it almost reflects himself only as well, being too cocky. But it was about two peacocks fighting at the top. And last year, I led the theme in terms of what it was going to be. So he had to follow me in terms of his designs. I say that because he normally designed the king costume and I would design the queen costume. So last year, I designed the queen, and I always wanted to redo the queen, the peacock queen costume, and so he designed this as part of our portrayal of the peacock. So for me, you know, carnival is in safe hands. My son is now taking over where I've led, and his son, who is not there by the way, his son also is interested in carnival and is very much active in making costumes. Okay, so that's my journey in terms of costumes. Thank you.
That's just amazing to hear your experience of making the costumes and the history and the fact that you've got a legacy as well. That's just amazing. Has anyone got any questions that they'd like to ask? Wendy?
Hughbon, I wish I had met you in person. You know, you're my claim to fame. I have to like send a photo of, you know, back to the Caribbean and tell people I've met you guys. My question is this. In the Caribbean, as you know, from the Trinidadian carnivals and stuff like that, there's normally a political theme that actually follows some of the costume designs. And I know you've mentioned some of that within your current designs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering, any idea of what your designs would look like next year, given the heavy political climate we're in?
Well, that's a very good, interesting question. What happened is that this year, as you know, there is no carnival, but we had already launched our band in February. So the band had already been launched, and so we decided to just simply carry it on for next year. And the theme was around Las Vegas. It's called Mass Vegas, actually, not Las Vegas, Mass Vegas. It was very much about picking up on all the features that you'd find in Las Vegas, and you know, the showgirls and so on. But we were working in collaboration with another band called Anonymous. And so this year is this year was supposed to be the first time we were going to join together, where we were going to apply all mechanical ability with their pretty mass ability and join those together to create an interesting set of costumes. So we launched it back in February. So all the designs are already done. So we're just going to roll it over for next year.
And just to ask you one more question, if we are wanting to get involved in one of these bands, how do we go about doing that? Or if we want to create a band ourselves, maybe LYPFT will have a carnival band, you know, next year. We don't know. How do we go about doing that?
Okay. Well, I think that's a really good idea, and I think you should really strive for that, because I tell you, some years ago, I worked with Leeds Library, and the staff there, they applied for some fundings from the Arts Council, and they were able to then employ me to lead them in making costume designs around their theme, which was basically around the library. And you will see when you look at the short video that I made, there were 2 costumes that I made for the library. But what they also did was they made a troupe, and these troops went to other carnivals as well. So it is quite possible for you know, other groups to get together and be led by some designers in helping them to make costumes, so they can perform as that particular group and be represented in carnival in that way. So when you're interested, give me a buzz, and we'll see what we can do in terms of getting you up and ready on the road. But by all means, you can also check the Carnival Committee out as well. They'll have some other ideas about how to get involved.
Right, thank you, Wendy. We better get prepared, LYPFT, hopefully for next carnival.
Good.
Any other questions?
I think Mas has her hands up.
Mas? Okay, Mas, and
yeah.
Hand up as Mas. Go ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask, you know, you've made a few outfits which are really different altogether. What inspires you, and how do you come up with an idea that this year I want to make this? And also, how long does it take you to finish making it in preparation of the carnival?
Okay. That's a very good question. Like I say, you know, I mean, I'm inspired by lots of different things. So, you know, it's not just one thing, as I clearly mentioned: fantasy, nature, storytelling, anniversary, current affairs. Wendy mentioned politics, although I have stayed away from politics personally. But, you know, it's amazing when you have when you see something and you're inspired by it, you suddenly get all enthusiastic, and all of a sudden you begin to research it, and it's just like snowballs and just get bigger and better. Like I said, for example, when I designed that man on horseback, having thought about the idea of making a full-size horse, it was like, wow. So I started that in September, the year before the carnival.
Wow.
And most evenings and weekends after work, because I always had a full-time job then, and quite demanding in a lot of cases, but it was a good relief after work to come home, and that was my hobby. This is what I do. I would then make the costumes. And because I strive for perfection as well in terms of making sure things are going to work well and they're not going to break. So that particular project was a full year project.
Wow.
In fact, I also had to take a week holiday at the end just to finish it off in time for Carnival. So yeah, it can take a very long time. But typically, I would allocate something like 150 hours, for costume designs. And it's because, I think, you have to allocate a certain level of resource to be able to deliver a good costume. And so 150 hours typically is what I would work on.
Thank you.
Okay.
Abby, you had a question?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Hughbon, for sharing your beautiful work with us. I just think it's very, very humbling. Thanks so much. So I have two questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is, I want to ask, did you always know that this is what you want to do? Or what make you go for it? Or is there something else you wanted to do and you kind of, before you go for this? That's the first one. And the second question is, from what you said, so you have 8 years period between your apprenticeship before you get your winning costume. So those 8 years, what kept you going? Was there any point during those periods where you thought, I think I would never get a winning costume? Or what was the motivation? What kept it going?
Okay.
Thank you.
Again, that's two very good questions. In the Caribbean, Carnival is celebrated, at different times. I know certainly in Trinidad, it's celebrated around February time, Lent time. But in St. Kitts and Nevis, where I came from, Carnival is celebrated around Christmas time. And during that time, you can see traditional mass, and you can also see current mass in terms of people in bikini and beads and so on. But I've always been interested in the traditional mass, and so I was inspired by stilt walkers. We call them Mokajumbi in St. Kitts. And like I said, since as a kid, I wanted to make some stilts so I could walk on stilts. So the idea of being involved with Carnival probably started at that point. And being at Carnival always gives me that wonderful feeling of being part of. It's an opportunity to be free. It's an opportunity just to be something else. And so I've always had that, as an escapism for me in terms of what I do. But you talk about the 8 years apprenticeship. I said that because I wanted to make it very clear that I haven't always designed winning costumes, and it took me a long time before I understood all the features. What kept me going was this pursuit of excellence. And to some degree, that is what keeps me going now. I don't design costume to be better than the next guy or the next costume. I make costumes so it can be better than the one I did last year. So this pursuit of excellence is something that I personally do. So whether or not the judges like it is by the way. I mean, I know for me, it's about that pursuit of excellence. And I've always said that if I got to a point where I ran out of ideas and was repeating what I did previously, I just wouldn't bother. But as I've grown older and more experienced, then I'm getting more and more ideas. And so it's hard to give it up. You know, I'm just infused every year to be able to do different things. One of the things that I do, which I haven't said, is that I work with lots of other groups. You know, I work with carnivals groups up and down the country. There's one of the leading bands in London called Mahogany, for example. You know, I would work with them in helping them to resolve some of the technical problems in terms of structures. So, you know, I get off on that. I mean, I don't enjoy, you know, second beads and then munties and feathers and costumes. I enjoy the mechanics and the structures. So, you know, I am mindful of that I don't do a very good job in terms of finishing, because a lot of people have got that skill set, but not many people have got my skill set. So I try and apply my skill set in as full a way as possible. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? No, I've got just a couple of questions to end then. The first one is, I'd always admired the costumes for their beauty and creativity, but I hadn't quite realised what an engineering feat it is to get all the bits working in unison. What's been the most difficult engineering feat that you've undertaken when you've dealt with the carnival? I mean, the horse looked absolutely amazing. So I was just wondering that's the first question. And the second question is, in these kind of unpredictable times, you know, we have this kind of situation where it feels like we might lose a lot of things, or it will be a number of years before we get back to especially the community and public things that we enjoyed so much.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's important in this country for the carnival to continue? So those are my two questions to you.
Okay.
That's okay.
It's fine. And again, very good questions. I think you hit it right on the head. The horse was the most difficult and challenging design that I've done. And clearly that took me a long time to resolve and to be able to build and make sure it worked good. So there is no question about that. But one of the designs that I really enjoyed doing most was the fish. Because the idea of being able to design a fish that was that big, that was carried, you know, on the girl's shoulder, and that behaved in a sense the way the fish behaved in the water, for me was quite a mechanical challenge. I remember one of the judges said to me, he said, Hughbon, you normally design mechanical stuff, so why do you only just design something as simple as the fish? Well, the reality is that fish was not simple. I had to do a lot of research in materials to be able to get it to behave the way it did, and to make sure it wasn't too heavy for the person to wear. I mean, I've used carbon fiber. I've researched different type of carbon fiber to allow those fins to be made so that they can be extended over a very long distance without actually curving at the ends. And so for me, that was quite a challenge, being able to replicate something in nature using the materials that I had available to me. So yeah, that was probably one of the more challenging for me, although the horse was clearly the most difficult in terms of mechanics. But the next question about our present time, I mean, I think the effect of COVID is going to be long lasting. It's going to really have a real deep effect in time to come. And a lot of things that we hope and wish that will continue may not continue. Funding, for example, I could see that being a problem, because it's going to be hard, I think, to justify, you know, funding Carnival, for example, when there are much more other urgent, needy social services that's required for people's well-being. However, I think carnival is important, like the arts are important as part of our well-being. It is not just about working. It's not just about just getting all the services right. It is about having the opportunity to express ourselves. The theaters are funded, to create the arts, and a lot of people then use that as a way of escapism and entertainment. I see carnival in that light as well. And if you talk to other people about carnival, I mean, obviously I've spoken from a design point of view. If you speak to other people that involved in carnival in terms of how they see carnival, what the day means to them, the opportunity to come along and meet friends, and even if it's just a year event, it is so important. If you talk about carnival in terms of diversity, when I'm traveling along the road, I look at the crowds, and nowadays there's probably more white people in the crowd than there are black people. And again, that's reflecting, the power of carnival in terms of people taking part. I mean, I'm involved in carnival up and down the country, and a lot of people now in carnival don't look like me. I mean, a lot of them are white people because they understand the benefits of carnival. So I would say it is important that carnival continues. We need that escapism, even if it's just for one day. And to not have it would be quite a loss. And I think in these difficult times, it make it even more so important that we do have things like carnival. People can at least have an opportunity to celebrate and relax and have some fun. And in my case, to continue the culture.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hughbon.
Okay.
It's sad for us that Arthur wasn't able to be here, but it's been a real privilege that we've had the time to really look at your designs and to hear about how you've created them and your history and legacy in developing the carnival. So thank you very much. I think we can all give Hughbon a round of applause, can we, just to show our appreciation? Thank you.
Just need to unmute ourselves first. Let's do that.
Right, well, thank you guys very much for inviting me along and giving me the opportunity of sharing with you my true love and passion. Thank you. I do look forward to working with you next year, if not the year after. Thank you.
Watch the space.
And I will apologize for Arthur because he has tried, and I know how difficult it can be at times when you just don't get it right and you can't get through. So okay. I do apologize for Arthur.
That's okay. That's okay. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, the next thing on the agenda is me, isn't it?
Yes.
Wendy, is that right?
Yeah.
A poem by me. So I'm going to read a poem by one of my favourite writers, Maya Angelou. Born in 1928, she died on the 28th of May, 2014. Most of you will be aware of who she is, but for those that aren't aware of her, she was a Black American woman, author, poet, historian, songwriter, playwright, producer, performer, civil rights activist. And in fact, she worked closely with Martin Luther King during the civil rights movement in the 1960s. She's best known for her work, the book called I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, which is quite an amazing book. If you can read it, it accounts events in her life. And this book was nominated for the National Book Award in 1969. She was an outspoken woman who defended passionately the rights of women, young people, and the marginalized. I was introduced to the writings of Maya Angelou when I was in my 20s. And I read her books, and I was so in awe of her, and so respected her work, her ability to communicate, her confidence, her history. I admired her so much that when my daughter was born in the year 2000, I grappled with family name Maya, family name Maya, and in the end I decided I would call her Maya, so that if I was an extreme disappointment to her, I could say, "You're named after Maya Angelou. Look her up, find out more about her." She's 20 now, and she's wonderful. And I'm constantly saying to her, and when I was preparing this, I said to her, "Listen to this poem. It's written by Maya Angelou, the woman you were named after." And she loved it. So hopefully she will start to look into this magnificent woman a bit more, and just be inspired by her. So the poem I'm going to read is called "Still I Rise," and it's by Maya Angelou. Okay. I'll keep the glasses on. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like the moon and the stars with certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cry? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Ooh. Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I am a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. Thank you. Amazing, amazing. It still makes me emotional. I'm not. Okay.
Thank you, Dympna. That was absolutely wonderful, and what a wonderful way to end today's session. I think we all want to unmute ourselves and actually give Dympna a round of applause for her time and how wonderfully chaired the meeting was. And a brilliant message. I rise, and that's what we intend to do this month, is to elevate our cultures, elevate our arts, and actually share that wider with our colleagues, so they too can elevate us, and that's what we're intending to do. So that's brilliant. I don't know whether anybody has any last questions or comments or any reflections on what today's meeting was about, or You can put it on the chat if you like.
No, it's good.
Well, I'll just add, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I thought it was very, it was nice to hear the history of the carnival. I've been to it so many times, but to actually hear the person who does the costumes was really good. And if it's the first time you're cheering Dympna and the Abbey, yeah, well done. Yeah, and obviously Wendy in the background. Yeah. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, I echo that. I mean, and to learn about the mechanics of costumes, and I think we take for granted some of the things that we witness, and the costumes are amazing. Something I've always kind of admired from afar. How on earth do they get all of that to work, and for one person to carry it? And so yeah, I totally find that fascinating. I think it's wonderful. So you know, I mentioned about LYPFT having a band next year, if we're allowed to. Maybe something we can think about. So if anybody fancy doing something similar or being part of that, you know, do get in touch, and we can, yes, Veronica, and we can and we can definitely see how we can hook up with Hughbon and see how we can get our own little troupe going. I think that would be such a wonderful thing for LYPFT if we can actually be part of our community and celebrate together. It would be fantastic. So I wasn't joking when I said that. You know, I actually meant it. That means I have to lose like a stone in weight before, but I'll get there. You know, yeah. John, did you wanted to?
No, I've just actually found a quote from Maya. It says that there is no, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. I think that's a really early speak up message.
Yes.
Yeah. I've sent that to Dympna. So,
right, great, thank you.
And nothing will work unless you do. That's another very simple message.
Yeah. And certainly in the WREN, we've talked about being our authentic selves as much as we can within the work environment. And that creates a better team culture where the whole individual is present, and that fits in with that. Thanks, John. Yeah. One of the quotes I like from Maya Angelou is, "When I know better, I do better." So, you know, you're always learning, aren't you? And I think, well, this is where I'm at the moment. And Maya says, when you know better, you do better. Yeah. So it's been a good to learn about the carnival and the costumes, and to really appreciate it. Yeah.
And when you do better, you do even better. Yeah, you keep striving to be your best. And I think that's such a great story, and that fits in quite well with Hughbon, your desire to always take your designs and your costumes that next level, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
Milton, is there anything that you'd like to add or ask or comment on?
Don't get me going, you know what I'm like, but I'm sorry I had to leave the Zoom meeting for a while, but I'm back, and I'm glad I was back to hear the poem by Dympna. I think I sent you a text, Dympna. I remember 20 years ago we used to walk around Roundhay Park during your pregnancy. I don't know where the time has gone, but it's fantastic to be part of that. It's good to be part of this. I'm now back onto the scene now, so you guys better be aware, because I'm coming with full force. You know, I love what we do. I'm very proud of you all. I'm proud of you, Wendy. Your consistency, your persistence, I believe, brings results. And you know, we don't always agree, but that's part of growing and developing. You know, and those are things that I'm only interested in. You know, Linda, I don't know if Linda is still with us here, but Linda as well. You know, I feel so proud to know that somebody who looks like us is carrying a flag so far up towards where that ceiling is. I think it's fantastic. And as I said, there's so many things we can say and do, but I'm glad to be a part of this. I'm now back on the work scene, so just hey, beware. Thank you all.
Fantastic, fantastic.
Thank you, thank you.
Is there any
All right.
other comment? Any questions, or is there anything more that people would like to know about West Indian Carnival or community, or any of our communities? Because that is something we can. I mean, Black History Month is 1 month, and my view is that this is something that we should be doing throughout. So if there's any specific things that you'd like to know, or you'd like, we can sort of invite our community speakers. You can invite our community to kind of share with us. So if there's any specific things that people are interested in, and Dympna.
Yeah, I was just thinking it would be good to get Arthur back.
Yeah,
and hear what he has to say, because he would have prepared, and I'm sure he'll be quite frustrated as well about the fact that he didn't have this opportunity. So it would be good.
And it's unfortunate. Internet connections recently have been pretty difficult. I think a lot of people are experiencing different issues. I think there's a surge during certain times of the day because everybody is actually on Zoom, etc. So yeah, but definitely we'll try to get Arthur back, and maybe he can actually sort of shed some more lights on that aspect, and maybe it's something that we can learn from. Maybe not having too many. Maybe we should have had just Hughbon and then Arthur, and allowed our time to kind of learn from there. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think that's it, isn't it? Oh, sorry. Veronica.
It's funny how I learned that when I came to England, I learned that what's that? Plantain is not just a big banana. Is when I went to the market, there's a guy, West Indian guy, who sells plantain. And I'm like, oh God, this banana is so big. And I wanted to find that it's called plantain. And I've been going to the carnival since I came to England, since 2001. And every year, I've never missed the carnival. It's the learning of different cultures and eating different foods, the colors, the costumes. And it's so sad that this year we didn't have it, because I'd already got my outfit ready to hit the road. But yeah, thank you so much for having this, because now you can tell that behind those costumes, there's a story. I never knew that. So it's something that I've learned today. So thank you very much.
Great. Okay, that's our first Zoom meeting celebrating Black History Month. So we'll say bye-bye to everybody and have a safe, sound week. And we'll see you hopefully at the next meeting next Thursday. What's on next Thursday, Wendy?
So Thursday the 22nd, I believe, of October, same time, we're having a panel discussion. So we have a panel of experts. We have Vanessa Mudd, who is a writer, but also she works in Heritage Corner, and she's kind of coming to represent sort of allyship and how allies can support. Also, we have Jodie Williams, who is also the author of The Definition of White Privilege, and she's going to be amazing. I've chatted to her on the phone. That was supposed to be like a 2-minute conversation. Half an hour later, I said goodbye to her. She's absolutely fabulous. Also both local speakers. We also have the CEO of Harrogate Trust and the Nightingale NHS organization as well, Steve Russell, and he is the expert within his field, but also representing intersectionality as well. And we have our own Sue Proctor, who is the chair of our board, LYPFT, and she is here to represent us and what the trust is doing in terms of inclusion. And we also have Alison Lowe, who is a historian, again, one of our local community members, actually sort of being part of the panel. So if you have any questions that you'd like to pose to any of them, please send it into either myself or send it into the RES, so that is WRES-staffnetwork.lypft@nhs.net, and we will put those questions to the panel. Sharon Prince will be chairing that meeting. So please do join us, and everybody is welcome. I also want for you to put in your diary the 30th of October at between 4 and 5, we have an audience with Daliso Kaponda. He is a comedian born in Malawi, but he was first probably made known to us nationally via the Britain Got Talent program. And he is coming to do a stand-up and an audience with. So everybody is welcome. Share with your teams, let your teams know. Yeah, and just invite as many people as possible. And if you have any questions that you'd like for Daliso, again, send it to us and I can send it to him, and he can kind of incorporate that in his material as well. So like Dympna said, it was a pleasure actually sort of having the time with you guys. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.